Welcome to Get Big Out Loud Radio, where we explore living the complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life with me, Kari Knutson, and Dr. Pat on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Are your thoughts keeping you small? Are you ready to get big? I will offer you ideas to transform what you are thinking into conscious action. Explore what is keeping you small and how to shift your behaviors in order to get big. Learn what is possible for you. Get ready to get big and live life out loud starting now.
Hey, everybody, we got a great show for you today. Kari Knutson, let me just say a few things. That if you ever wondered why some of us are still here, and what I mean by still here, I mean, yes, we're like everybody else. We have been through the past 4 years, some of us way before that. But why are we still here? What have we learned? And just so you know this about Kari, and I want to make sure you do know this about Kari, is you're talking with somebody that is not just one of the most incredible coaches out there, but she is a professional speaker, school counselor, storyteller. We haven't done the rap artist thing yet, but I have an idea, especially after watching the Super Bowl thing with Usher yesterday. But the thing I want you all to know is this field of emotional intelligence is built into everything we do and everything we talk about. And right now, for those of you out there, if you want to find out more about Kari, just go to knutsonspeaks.com, KNUTSON speaks.com, and you're going to find out why. Here's the deal for today. I hope you can get ready for this. Hard truths, TRUTHS. Like the truth of it. Like, if you watch my cousin Vinny, Joe Pesci had a different way of saying it, but it doesn't matter how you say it, what it looks like, how you spell it. What does that even mean? Kari, great to have you. And, you know, I love this topic for a lot of reasons. You know, we're talking about the famous, I don't know, how many times have I said it? How many times have you said it? Kari, can I be honest with you right now? No, lie to me, please. Lie to me. And you know, it's so interesting because I was talking with my team last week, and one of my team members asked me, Pat, do you have a list of non-negotiables? I mean, that I'm paraphrasing. And I said, I really have 3 when it comes to work and working environments. And I think that people think you're going to say something very sophisticated or like avant-garde. I said, no. 1, don't lie to me. Yeah, you know, I don't know, but I'm the person that studied. So when you say that, and then somebody says, can I be honest with you? What are we already thinking in our minds right that? Hey, can I be honest with you? What are we thinking? Why do we say that? What are we doing with that right now?
Yes,
right?
yes, that's such a good, that's what made me think about the topic for this month, because I was thinking about the idea of truth and how many times people say, hey, can I just be honest with you? And it's not like they're lying to us necessarily, but we do say that quite a bit to people, especially to preface something. When we say, can I be honest with you, means I got to tell you something that might be hard for you to hear. That's why I called today's episode Hard Truths.
Thank you.
If it's like, can I tell you something? You did so great. Mostly I'm just going to say you did so great. I'm not going to preface it why, hey, can I be honest with you? So we do the, hey, can I be honest with you as a setup. So our brain knows, hey, there might be something difficult to hear coming up. Not that I've lied to you, because I want to make the distinction that I don't think we walk around just lying to everyone for the sake of lying. I think sometimes, like there's a saying, the truth hurts. And like, do I want to actively hurt someone? Normally the answer is no. Also, is my full truth necessary or helpful at this time? Is the person asking for that? Like, you have to think about why and how we choose to tell people something. Like if you're at your, you know, Aunt Martha's house for dinner and the stew tastes a little funky, but she spent all day on it, and you're like, I was like, how do you like it? You're like, well, it's very tasty. And I'm going to sit here and eat it to preserve our relationship, right? Because I don't want to hurt your feelings about that. And then there's other times if you're on the Cooking Network show, like this stew isn't good. It won't go far.
Oh,
Right?
oh,
It depends on it depends on the context. But do you think of the context and the relationship? But I wanted to bring it up because I was wrestling with this idea of why do we say, look, can I be honest with you? Or I'm going to tell you something. It might be hard to hear. Hard truths. Why is the truth so hard to hear, and in what context does it become hard? And then I also want to talk about the truth that we tell to other people and the truth that we tell to ourselves. So truth is like this big thing that I've been just ruminating on for the past month, and I wanted to talk about it in the podcast today.
well, let's just go and just run right through it, right? Because you and I have done shows on this before, and there are consequences to both telling the truth all the time and not telling the truth all the time. Those are extremes. Like if we had a continuum, right? Like a ball over here and a ball over here, and we had this continuum, and on the one side was I tell the truth all the time, and on the other side was I never tell the truth.
Right. And on the continuum, which is such a good model to think about, on the continuum is like the difference between if someone says, do I look good in this outfit versus do you love me anymore? Like think about the questions we're being asked to tell the truth about. Like, did you like the play versus do you think we should stay married? Like those kind of things are pretty huge. And on the spectrum of truth telling and what it requires of us, I do think that sometimes we have to gauge, like you said, it's not usually all or nothing. And when people say, I want to hear the truth, it means that at some level we do cover, or we do try to make things nicer. It's because we're trying to preserve relationships with people. We're not doing it because we're liars, but we're thinking about the relationships. And that's part of the emotional intelligence. Like, how am I keeping the relationship with you working? And at what levels do we share things? Also, what can the relationship take in terms of truth telling or not? And what is called for in the moment? Like, also, I call this sometimes yucking people's yum. If someone is like really loving something or doing something or having a good time, your criticism of that, like how warranted is it in the moment? Like, and so again, we have to think about the context, the outcome, the level they have in the relationship, and the point too. What is our point to tell the truth? Is it to be helpful or hurtful? Is it to be right? Ensure that we know, or are we preserving the relationship? That's why I don't think there's any clear, like, do it this way all the time, but we do have to think about being discerning. And I think that to me came up a lot researching this and thinking about it. What does it mean to be discerning in relation to how much truth we may tell someone?
I totally love this because I was thinking about this as I was sharing a story about how I got the graphic skills I have, right? People think when they see some of the graphics work, they think, oh, you study. No, I didn't study. I got a line job in the phone company to manage graphics. And the idea was, Pat, you're never going to get promoted to director unless you have a line job. So they give me the worst job in the entire company on a service center, inside service center that they were trying to put out of business. So think about this. Right? Mary Louise Smith, one of the best mentors I've ever had, one of the toughest mentors I've ever had. She's the one with, you don't walk in the room until, like you can answer what part of the problem are you? That was Mary Louise Smith. Okay. But here's the thing. For a year, Mary Louise said, young lady, like that, young lady, you are not going to do any of what Lionel told you to do. We are going to upgrade, we're going to automate, we're going to change things, and we're not going to tell a single person. This was for a year. This is for a year. And what I loved about it was I didn't have to represent that. She did. I had to implement it. But it's an interesting idea, like when you're caught in between a rock and a hard place when it comes to truth, right? Isn't that tricky?
It's so tricky, and it's worth wrestling with. And that's why I think sometimes we give up because things are hard to wrestle with. And I think also because there's no clear answer. Sometimes we seek
Yeah.
a definitive, like it has to be this way or that way. And that's why we wrestle with the truth. We tussle with it because it's not clear cut. And I think, especially in things, personal truths are sometimes the worst. Should I leave my job or should I stay? Am I happy? Am I not? Do I want to stay in this relationship or don't I? Do I finally need to like talk to someone about my addiction or not? Like whatever the big question is, those we wrestle when you've heard the term we're wrestling with the truth. It
Yeah.
is because it's not clear cut. And that's again why it's even more important to talk about, because how the truth, when we're ready to face the truth or own the truth or like believe the truth, we get out of denial. All of those terms that we use are because truth is like this big thing. And to act like it's very simple or cut and dry, I think diminishes
Yeah.
the concept, and also how we can use thinking about it to actually help us with our own situations
Yeah.
with the truth. Because I think any listener out there could think, what am I wrestling with right now around the truth? Like, and it could be as simple as when I open my credit card statement, the truth is right there. Right? That's the truth of how much I saw. When I look at the scale, that's the truth, right? And then what you do with that is another story. But some of us are, wrestling with those kinds of truths. Other people have harder things that we're wrestling with, like I brought up with addiction or money things or behavior things or any the bigger issues that take up space in our minds. So that's why the idea of this topic is fascinating to me. And I think too, if we hold things, instead of saying like, well, this is a scenario where we think about the truth, I like to think about more personal, like how does truth look to me in my life right now?
Yeah.
How am I wrestling with it? Then then it really hits home about how complex it is, how discerning you have to be. And then
Yeah.
you might give yourself a break too, especially if you're like, why can't I just make a decision? Because it's hard. It's hard. You have to wrestle with the truth.
It really is. And what I love about this is you will get there. See, you will get to the truth if you're willing to take the journey to get there.
Mhm.
And sometimes the hardest things are really to face things. There is this exercise in the academic world, especially the school that I came from, there's an exercise and none of us pass it. We all failed it. And I look back at what it was. It's really an interesting scenario. It's about an entrepreneur business owner, and they get money and they throw it into the company, and the company is failing. Then they get more money and throw it in. Then they get failing, and then they get more money and they keep investing. They call it something. It's really like a syndrome, and this person can't let it go, can't let go of the company. What was so interesting about this is all of us as students, all of us went into complete denial with this case study. And we're like, no, just give it one more try. Just try it again. Just put more money in it. Just give it one more try. And that's what we do in the casino, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's just just try get like that false hope or false belief or the truth, like denial and the truth are on one like seesaw. Like you could be like it's they're connected. And again, it's part of its protection because it's hard to see the truth all the time. It's hard to get to the truth. It's hard to process the truth. And that idea of being in denial, a lot of us are in denial about things. And especially in a case study or in the face of what you're doing, like, oh, come on, just one more chance. Or instead of saying this business is failing, this is not a profitable strategy. This is not going to work. Because part of it's great because the human spirit wants to keep hope alive. And the other part of it is ridiculous because we don't see the writing on the wall. We don't see like how many times before we realize is like this not gonna work. And that's the human conundrum.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of our experience, and that's why we even say things, the writing's on the wall, or the truth hurts, or like I'm gonna show you want to see how it really is, here's the truth of it, like here's the lift the veil up, right? Whatever it is, we tend to organize our lives in such a way we see what we want to see, and sometimes that's not the truth because it's hard or it hurts, or like you said, sometimes you have to walk through fire of the moment to get to what you want, but it's not easy. And that's again why
No,
we
it's
treat our
not.
lives around, we want comfort, we want ease. And sometimes, this is another thing I'll say about why it's hard to see the writings on the wall. Sometimes we're more comfortable in our discomfort because we know what to expect, than if we would like see what writings on the wall. We know we have to make a change and we have no idea what's going to come after it. So then we get scared into complacency. So it's easier to deal with things, even if they're not great, because at least we know what to expect. And truth and recognizing that equals change. And
Right.
sometimes it is so hard to change that we'll just deny the truth and stay with where we are.
You know, I love that we're talking about this because it's very difficult for any one of you listening. I know Kari and I have a little fun with things like this and we laugh a bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there are really times in our lives where, the conversations that need to be had may not seem like they're a win-win, may not seem like I care about you if I have to have this conversation.
Mhm.
But in the end, there is a level of caring and truth telling that go very close together. And this is where the confusion is, Kari. The confusion is, well, wait a minute, you don't really care about me to be saying that. You really care about you. It's very difficult to tease who's caring about what. But here's what I know. Truth and accountability are they're like, I don't know if they're two peas in the same pod, but they seem to rub up against each other and cause, I don't know, is it a healthy friction?
Well, I'm trying to think how they do truth and accountability, or truth and relationship, or truth and outcome.
Responsibility.
Yes.
It's it is really interesting. And, I'm very fortunate that I worked in organizations where the people I work for and the organizations I work for, they were so performance based. And this is the good, the bad, and the ugly about feedback and honesty. But these companies are driven by results. And there was no right way to give somebody feedback. And I know this today, hard feedback is very difficult to give. Telling the truth to somebody, either about performance or about many things, can be difficult. But I got to tell you something right now. I've learned from recovery,
Mm-hmm.
they ain't no beating around the bush. So there are some things that people say to me, Pat, why can't we do 12-step programs if we're not, addicts? I said, well, I don't know. You can get the big book and you can do them. But why isn't it more universal? I said, because it's hard. And it's about a level of truth that if you're not accustomed to it, or there's no benefit for you to tell that level of truth, you will not do it.
Mm-hmm.
You are not going to do it. You're going to be, I'll be back. Yes. In the words of Arnold, it is very difficult sometimes to face yourself, let alone face another person and say, you got a big piece of spinach hanging from your teeth, girlfriend, right? But this is so important today. It's so important today. I want to ask you this question. You were a counselor in school. What are the consequences for not being a truth teller? Give me from where you sit.
Well, when you think about the consequences of not telling the truth, you have to think about it in two ways: to yourself and to other people. And you also have to think in the context of the relationship to yourself and the relationship to other people. So if you start first with other people, the consequence of not telling your truth could be incredibly minimal. It could be like your opinion almost, right? But I like this or I didn't. It could be someone shows you a piece of art and like, what do you think? It's okay. And your truth could be minimally impact depending on the relationship, depending on what that person's expecting, if depending on the situation, if it's neutral or not, whatever it is. If that person is your partner and they're at their first art show and they ask you, what do you think of my piece? Like, well, it's okay. I think like owning what that will do to the relationship and how you treat that is different depending on the context, right? And you could say, you might have to think about, it's not really for me, but I can see you put a lot of time into it and a lot of effort. It's not really my style, but I can see someone who likes modern art would think that's incredible, right? Like you have to think about how you're saying that. Or sometimes like how do you feel about it is more important than how I think. I'm not to judge. So the truth of that situation is, do you need my opinion at this time, or do you want it? Or like, to me too, am I offering it to be helpful? Like, if I got a big piece of spinach in my teeth and I'm about to go give a talk, please tell me that I have that before. I'd rather have one person see it than 100, right? So then I want to thank you because you're caring about me past the context. And we don't, maybe let's say it's a stranger. Let's say I've had lunch at a gig and I'm sitting with a group of people and I'm about to give my session. And before I leave the table, it says, I just want to tell you, you have, spinach in your teeth. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. Right. I don't have a relationship with that person other than this moment, but they cared enough about me because the outcome of them telling the truth would have a big impact.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to think about, in all these situations, those examples are with other people, but this example is like with yourself. When you think about telling the truth to yourself, sometimes you say like, I'm just not ready. I just don't feel like I can handle the truth.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stay in denial a little longer because I've got to function in other areas of my life and I can't tackle this right now. Or I'm not in a safe space where I can do the work, or I'm not in a healthy place. Like we have all these things that we need to take into consideration. It's not like you're just lying to yourself because there's something wrong with you.
No.
Sometimes we're in denial for all kinds of reasons. And that's the point of like the purpose and the point of truth telling. And here's just a quick example, telling it to yourself, like with a credit card bill. Your credit card bill comes, you see it's higher than you thought, and it's just a number, but then you make it mean, and then I'm a failure and I can't figure this out and I don't have a good job and I'll never get my finances right. And the story you tell yourself around the truth of that, then you have to say, is that helpful or hurtful? Is that judgy or opportunistic? Is that curiosity building, or is it just straight judgment and like, you suck, kind of, to summarize that in a kind of a way? Like,
That's exactly right.
dealing with it.
It is. And I love this because you talk about the different levels of consequences. Let's talk about these for a minute. The consequences of being honest, because I know these levels, I've experienced them. And there's a trick to this that we're going to talk about during the show today. But to all of you listening, we're talking about the hard truths, and they're hard ones. I have never had to give an easy performance evaluation. I'm telling you, it is just, until you understand that you're actually helping someone by telling them how they're doing and what they can improve, until you really wrap your mind around that, it is very difficult to sit in corporate America and do those kinds of things. And by the way, I designed performance management systems. And I watched organizations take that design and just annihilate its purpose, just horrible. But the levels of consequences for being honest are, let's talk about what they are. They're from accepting to all sorts of emotions, right?
Yes. And when you think about, like, sometimes you can accept, like, the response, like, I can accept that hard truth. I can talk to you about it. And it goes from like that range, but all the way up to like, this is going to affect our entire relationship and I can't be with you anymore if that's what you really think, or I can't talk to you, or this creates a wedge between us. It goes from like accepting to annoyed to like total rejection.
Yeah.
And this is what I want to say, in the where truth usually sits best is in the context of a relationship that has some meaning. And even when you're talking, performance reviews are a great thing to talk about, because that's the ultimate, like, I'm going to sit down with my boss once a year and then you're going to tell me how I'm doing. And that creates anxiety for so many people, both the people giving the review and the people getting it. And here's what I think about, though. If I'm in a situation where I have a relationship with that person, where I see them more than once a year when they're sitting down in front of me, that's going to change the conversation. If I've observed them one time, made some notes, and then give them critique about it, what's the value in that? Because this is what I think about all the time with those kind of reviews. Someone who comes and sees you once a year, writes some notes and goes, if you came into my personal life once a year for 20 minutes and took some notes, you might see a joyous, happy, insightful, loving person ready to go take on the world. You might see an angry, bitter, upset person totally crying. You might see someone who's a fantastic parent, really connecting with their kids. You might see someone in a horrible parenting moment who's super frustrated and thinks, how did anyone let me take kids home from the hospital? You might see a person in a great marriage. You might see someone in a horrible marriage. You can't do that. We're not the sum of like one moment in time. We are complex people. And that's why relationships build when you see me over time, when we can talk because we know each other past just the moment. That's what I think when these reviews, relationships are the basis of a review. When someone says, here's what I've observed you doing over the years, here's what I think is working great, here's the feedback I have based on my knowledge of what you do, how you do it, your personality. If I can give a more robust critique of the truth of what I need to say that might be wrong or need to be fixed or feedback in any way, the constructive element of feedback partially comes from the relationship, but also partially becomes from like what you're hoping to get from that. Am I just saying this to be mean? Am I saying this so you can grow? Am I saying
Yeah.
this to be helpful? And also, what's the context of our relationship? So that's why it's so hard. And I'll just say one more thing about this too. In feedback, human beings could, if you have 100 people give you feedback, if you get 99 like good job and one you suck,
Oh.
this isn't good, you're going to perseverate on the one, right?
Yeah,
So
you're
we
gonna
have
have nightmares. It's like nightmares. You're gonna have nightmares for a year about that one thing.
that
And
one, and that's when you have to tell yourself, why was that so hard to hear? Because I want to hear that I'm good. I want to hear that people like me. We all do. Everybody has it. So when you're giving feedback that's critical, better instead of like that wasn't very good, like I didn't like this and this, I thought this trailed off, I wasn't sure about the meaning of this. Like if you could be more specific and give it some meaning, because then we don't take it as personally as like, I thought your slides were in a strange order, or they didn't follow it well, or the color scheme made it hard to read. It's very different feedback than I hated that presentation.
it is
So
very different. But we're talking about, so we're gonna take a short break because what we're talking about is so serious. Look, I was in a 14-year relationship, and when it ended, right, my friends were like, well, we all saw that coming. I'm like, what? Yeah, yeah.
the
I mean, why didn't you see it? And I'm like, why didn't you tell me? What do you mean? Like, and they're like, Pat, think about this one thing. Every year on the anniversary of the relationship, your partner goes away for a weekend on retreat. What do you think's wrong with that? You don't see anything wrong with that? Do we really need to tell you that? When we come back, we're going to talk about those relationships. But in the world we live in now, let's talk about a little bit more about the job market, agreements, contracts, because the world of careers and employment has changed so drastically, and it continues to change. But what are new employees doing? What are companies doing? And what could we learn? I mean, in the situation you are in, you get new class, new students are floating in all the time. They come in and they go and they come in and they go. It's like transient. They come in and they go. I can't even imagine how hard that is, right? To be in that job that you were working and just to see this rotation and not get attached to them. But also there is strength that happens from truth telling, whether you're a student, whether you're an employee, an employer, whether it is your loved one in the month of February, put a love going on. What if you were to say to your little partner there, hey, honey, do you think we should renew our whatever we got going on here? And they say, no, thank you. Let's take a short break, everybody. Oh, that was so not February.
anti-Valentine. We're not going to talk about that in
what
February.
the
It's like February. It's jinxing it.
No, but the outcome that we're going to talk about is really good because
Okay.
you see there's a blessing in this. If you get that honest feedback, oh my gosh, the homework's done for you, right? The homework's done. But why is it that we can't face that truth? Why is it we can't face that truth? And when we come back, I'm going to tell you what one of my coaches, I have a bunch of coaches I work with, right? I have a financial coach, I have an emotional, I got a spiritual, right? But I'm going to tell you what my career coach said to me over the weekend that I should be doing in all of my employment contracts with people. I'm going to tell you what he said I should do. And then I'm going to tell you why he said it. Let's take a short break, everybody. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. You are listening to Get Big Out Loud with Kari Knutson and me, Dr. Pat. We do this tag team. I love what we do together. But today we're talking about the hard truths. And what does that mean? And Kari's going to really walk us through this. Before we go ahead, please tell folks how they get a hold of you, how they find out what you're doing, where you're going to be, where you're speaking, all of the above.
So you can find all about me at knutsonspeaks.com. It's KNUTSON speaks.com. I'm on social media under Knutson Speaks, and you can see where I'm at. I try to post my gigs, who I'm speaking to, and that's a great way to get in touch with me for coaching or presentations or deep thoughts, any of it.
I love it because, you know, part of this is how do we represent ourselves? And that's what you're an expert in helping people do that so well. You know, a lot of times we do a lot of work for other people, but we don't know how to represent ourselves very well. And both you and I have coaches. And I before the break, I said, you know, I was working with my coach because I have a specific situation with a client that I needed help with. And I didn't know how to advise her. But what he said to me was so fascinating to me. And he said, basically, look, in the world now that you live in, and most people that work in an industry where most of the staffing are contract, because it's such a transient. I mean, people come and go in this industry left and right. The other thing about having contract employees is we're in the format where if you are a regular employee here, you would not be able to do side gigs. You couldn't freelance. It's so proprietary. If you sneezed, and those are the guidelines of a lot of companies. If you go work for a company like Boeing, you can't go, you can't hop over here and do a side job for somebody. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But it's fascinating about that because we were talking about it, and he said, you know, Pat, you have to really look at what each party wants. And then once you get that agreement, why is everybody so afraid of putting things in writing? And let's talk about that, because putting it in writing, that credit card receipt, that's in writing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard truth. Then when you flip it over, like all the small print, that is a hard truth. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's difficult for us to do the dance between accepting the truth of a situation or not. And why is that so difficult? Because I'm telling you, I'm a little bit on the fence about what I want to do with our contracts. But he's got a really good point. He said, how do you know what anybody's agreeing to if you don't spell it out? I said, okay, we can. And then he says, you have to have everybody initial it. I said, what am I getting? Like a high finance loan here? It's interesting where we are. Are we in that place where we don't trust people to keep their word?
Well, it's interesting that you say, what are we agreeing on? Because keeping my word, like you and I could have a conversation and we could think we agree to it and like, yeah, we're all good. And I could be interpreting that one way and you could be interpreting another. And sometimes putting it in writing does make it very clear to everyone and gives you more time to think in it, and or uses the same language. So like I'm not interpreting into my Kari speak and you're not interpreting Dr. Pat speak. We're like seeing it in the same language in the same way. So I think it has to do with our interpretation, not that we're actively not trying to keep our word, but sometimes it is important to say, like, what did we agree to? Yeah. And what I like using sometimes in therapy is like I call it like the third wall, but just means like the third thing in the room is the piece of paper or the document or the whatever, like sometimes even drawing things out on a piece of paper. It's taking it out of our voices and out of our minds and putting it somewhere. And it can be really powerful, especially when you're having a conversation that might be more difficult to be like, so we're outlining these three things, or so it's not left up to because honestly, sometimes in difficult conversations, you only hear the first thing and then you're not you're not really there anymore. So having a takeaway, like these are the things we covered. Do you agree that we talked about these? Do you understand? Are you agreeing to this before we leave today? These are the things, and it could be even for a good thing. Like, yes, we're agreeing to be in a contract, but why do we have contracts? Because we said we need to both say what we agreed to. Not because we're not going to follow through with them, but because sometimes it's like, this is what you
Yeah.
agreed to do. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And that's why I don't think it's necessarily not because of trust. I think I would say it's because of interpretation and the human
Exactly.
condition.
Exactly. I signed a work contract. Somebody was hiring us last, I don't know, March. And that was the first time I had ever seen something so thorough. And you would think I would have learned from that, because I so appreciate the time that went in to
Mhm.
really breaking things down to a level. Now, it wasn't about, well, this is how I want you to do the work. It's like, this is just the work, you
Yeah,
know,
this is just
and
the word. Yeah, that's a great way. That also
it's just the
neutralizes
work.
it a bit. That
Yeah.
neutralizes it, which is good because again, it can be hard to take, and sometimes that's just a great way to make it less emotional. The right time.
It's so important. I got to tell you, though, you got to read things carefully, because what happens when that misinterpretation happens? Let's just talk about that for a minute. What happens when you get to the place where you don't understand? For example, before the break, I said, this was a real situation. Huh, honey, why don't we renew our vows this Valentine's Day, right? Why don't we so get have like a little party? And you know, like, okay, that's one person's, and the other person's like, well, let me think about that. Now, if the conversation ends there, oh my goodness, how many of you out there are feeling what I'm feeling right now? Are you saying dump them? Is that, but what would be the next thing that one should do? Because this is what's not done. What would be the next thing
Yes,
that
because
one
the
should
next thing
do?
on our face, but the way you're telling the story is everyone's like, oh no, you don't love me anymore. Yeah, you made up a story about that. But the truth is, we don't know what the
No,
intention
no.
is about the person resisting. Where they may be like, I don't want to say stuff in front of a bunch of people. I'm more like you and me. Like, this is our thing. Or declaring love seems performative. And I'd rather like show you that I love you. Or like, we just spent a ton of money on our vacation, having people over, doing that. It's more practical. Like, I don't want to spend the money on that. I'd rather go to a nice dinner. Right. So you could have 20 different reasons why you don't want to do that. But on the face, if you just stop there, like, I have to think about it. You don't love me anymore. Like, that's
Well, I mean, I got to tell you, that was exactly the outcome of that. And I got the call and I just sat him down because I said, well, let's have a conversation. So it boiled down to something like this. The person that said, let me think about it, really wanted to think about it. Would have been so much better if they would have said, you know, honey, let me think about what I'd like to include. See, that was the missing piece.
Mhm.
Let me think about what I'd like to include. If that, what I'd like to include would have been in there, they wouldn't have walked away, pouted, the one person, walk in the other room, pouted, slammed the door, blah, blah, blah. But they were saying, I want to negotiate some new things. I
Mhm.
want to put some new things in there. You
Yeah.
know, if we're going to renew this, geez, it's like how many years old? Can we just give it a dang upgrade? Just one little piece would have changed that, right?
Yes, but that's the human condition of why it's so complicated. We miss one little thing and someone takes what we say the wrong way. We don't deliver it the way they can hear it. And then they're mad at us for being a jerk when really we meant to just give them some feedback that might be helpful. We have some great idea and we're ready to act on it and we haven't given someone else time. Like, this is the human condition and the human conundrum. And that's, again, why things that happen in the context of a relationship, and I don't necessarily mean long-term relationships, but in relationships where, like, I'm saying, like the person who tells me my fly is open, I have spinach in my teeth before I go present, or the person who gives me feedback with the intention of helping me. I'm in a relationship with that person. One person said, this is when I was early on in presenting, and she said, every picture you have up there is of a white woman. I just want you.
Right,
And I was like, wow, you're so right.
right.
And that now I do an audit of my slides. I
Yeah.
try not to use people. And if I do, I try to do a much better representation job of that. And I do it because I do it. It's called a presentation audit. And I do it because that one random person at a random talk 10 years ago said, hey, do you know this? And they weren't doing it to be like, hurt me. They were doing it to help me. And that's the context of that mini relationship versus the context of like our long-term relationships, our friendships. Like, I'll tell you a quick story about a friend of mine who I was having a conversation with her about her job search and what she was trying to do. And she's like, everyone's putting so much pressure on me. And like, and I got really defensive, like, who is doing that? I'm gonna go tell him to stop. And she's like, you are. I was like, oh my God, me. And I said, but I'm so nice. I'm so supportive. I'm so sweet. And she was like, it doesn't feel that way to me. And I thought, you know what? There's where the truth is. It's how it's coming off to her, not even what my intention is. So look at the complications of the truth there. And I was so glad our relationship could handle
Yeah.
that hard truth. I was
Yeah.
so glad that she said, it's you. So I could wake up to how I was impacting her. And we could do that in the safety of a relationship where she could say a hard truth and we're better for it. But
Yeah.
it could have been we're worse for it. I could be like, well, you never want my advice anyway. This is over. Right? Whatever. Like we're human. But in that moment, it was so transformative for our friendship because I knew she was okay telling me the truth. And that
Yeah.
made me feel closer to her rather than, rejected.
I think that's it. I mean, there are some people that, trust immediately. And you have that scenario that goes on where, you open the door and you just walk in and you're just one big open, yeah, you can tell me anything because that's just your nature. And then the other end of the spectrum is I don't trust anyone. Of course, there's everything in between. And trust has a large part to do with honesty. You want to talk about that for a minute?
What I want to say about I'm trying to think of the best way
The
to say
trust truth paradox.
yes, the trust, truth, honesty, reality, like all this stuff that the verbiage that we're even using, like it's the when you think about, do I trust this person and what they're telling me and what is the outcome going to be? Can our relationship handle the truth? Is there a level? And again, I don't want everyone to think like this is in long-term relationships because we have short-term
Oh
interactions with
yeah.
people all the time that I call relationships. Like
Yeah.
that even, and this is something that just happened recently. I have to trust that we had an electrician come over and one of our lights wasn't working and then he went to go check out our board, our what's that called,
Yeah. I know.
the circuit board
Yeah.
in our backyard, and
Circuit breaker.
the breakers, and he's like, oh my God, this breaker's not working because of this one's really old, this one should not be in your system, like what happened? And I was like, well, we had a flood and then we had some stuff redone and I didn't know to check the breakers. And he's like, listen, I don't want to upcharge you, but like this, look at this and this and see with your own eyes, like this is not okay and you're having your first results of that here. And part of me was like, do I trust this guy enough to believe what he's going to say? And then the truth that did those other guys not put in the right breaker things, then going down that path, like I just had made a whole story. And I thought, in this moment with this electrician, am I going to trust what he's saying and that this is the truth or not? Right. And then he's showing me physically, like, do you see this? And all I'm thinking is this is going to cost a lot of money and this is whatever. But like all of those things play into eventually me making a decision. And sometimes we don't have everything we need. I have to be like, I'm going to trust because this is his job and this is what he is good at. And this is what he says it's going to cost. Same when we go get our cars fixed. Like we have to trust in some element. Same though as trust, like when I'm coaching someone for public speaking, they're putting some level of trust in me that when I say, cut that story, that took a hard left turn. This doesn't quite make sense. Focus on this. Let's change the order, that they trust me with that feedback because I want a greater outcome for them, right? So then in the relationship, we can handle, we have some level of trust that can handle the truth, that can make the truth meaningful, that makes the truth helpful. And so whether we're in a relationship for a moment with someone we're in service with versus like someone we're helping in a work atmosphere or someone in our personal lives, that we're embedded in that trusting relationship. in order to tell the truth. It goes for all relationships.
It does. And, let's talk about the work relationship for a minute, because whether you're an entrepreneur or you work in corporate America, you have clients. If you're in corporate America, and I'm referring to corporate America, meaning you work for an agency of some kind and you have a boss. Let's just say that. And, it doesn't matter if you're in that situation or you're like the artist that I work with every day, who is a freelancer. That's what he does. There is a relationship that goes on with that, and truth is all about that. And here's really what happens if you're like us. You all entrust us. And we tell you, we're going to do this. We're going to create this for you. We're going to start your show. We're going to make sure that when I start your show, all of your assets, all your elements are correct. We're not going to misspell your name. We're going to do our best to make sure that accuracy, frequency, that we show some interest in what you do, that we make you look super, super great. When any of those things break down, we're in the kind of industry where you're entrusting us to your livelihood, to everything from a banner is something that's important to revenue for some people, right? And when that breaks down, what do you say? So what I say is, we messed up. That's what I say.
Yes.
We messed up.
Well,
and
that's
as a result of
truth. That's owning it, right?
But you can't deny it. And
Right.
It doesn't matter. We're in a very high dynamic environment. And we had a couple of meetings with our team. And I basically said, this is the environment. This is like broadcast news. This is where we are. There'll be changes coming in. The good news is this is job security for you. Being a busy organization is job security, but it's how you deliver that message that's more important than the message itself.
Oh,
It
yeah.
really is. Isn't that also true for hard truths? Isn't the how more important than the end game sometimes?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And that how, who, when, why, for what purpose, but the how we do it, that's why I want to touch into the aspects of emotional intelligence and being discerning and being thoughtful. And the how, you have the same information presented 3 different ways and have a very different response to
Yeah.
how it's presented. And that idea of owning like, I messed up and I'm sorry, I'm going to do everything I can to make it right, is one way to handle it. Another way you might be like, well, what about your problems? Like, we did this, but you have problems too. Like, not owning the fullness of it, or being like, well, I'm sorry, that's how you feel, but that's not how we see it.
Yeah,
Like,
I had to, what do you call it? I had to, what is the expression? I had to really eat it in this one situation with one of our clients who I know she is so good at what she does. She knows her brand. She knows every nuance of it. And I have about 5 people really like that it's not perfectionism. It's really knowing who you are, because I know who I am, I know what I believe, and I know why I believe it. And if I tell you this line needs to be read, it needs to be read. And all you can do in a situation like that is just listen to the person, just
that's
listen.
part of their truth, right? They're telling you their truth when they say that. And then, like you said, is it perfectionism? Is it being picky? Is it just how they like to run their show? Are they, where is this coming at? And is the feedback like, you need to fix my banner and you don't care about me, versus like, hey, my banner's messed up, I need you to fix it. Right? Like the add-on that we usually do, that's why it's so important to be thoughtful when we're telling the truth, when we're saying our truth, because we have to think about then what we either add to it or what we interpret from it, how we take it, how we give it. And that is vital to relationships being strong, is being
Yeah.
thoughtful.
Well, I mean, it happens across the board. I mean, especially for somebody like me, I was mixing something. I forgot to take something off of the mix at the end, which wasn't part of the intro. And this is what was in my face over the weekend, right? It's just one of those moments where you're trying to hurry up and you leave it on and it almost gets approved. with that little, because nobody wants to take 60 seconds to listen to the whole thing, right? And you get to the end. I don't know what it was about this morning that where I said, oh, I just got to listen to it. And I talked to them this morning and I said, I'm so sorry, you can't use that. I said, I didn't edit it properly for having you look at it. But you see, that's a conversation you got to be willing to have. You got to own it. You got to own your stuff. And what I have found is the hardest thing in this conversation is to stop making excuses. I think it's the hardest thing about truth.
Sure.
Where,
We're
you know what I'm
tied
saying?
yes, but we're tied in. This has a lot to do with our identity and like how we see ourselves. And it's easier to make excuses than to own things, because that's admitting. Part of our brain is like, oh, I have to admit that I didn't do that well. And we're kind of in our culture like, don't mess up, be perfect, do it right. And most of us don't set out to do things wrong. That's not how we operate. So then when we do something wrong, and it's an extra hard thing to take because we didn't mean it, we didn't intend it, we didn't hope for that outcome, and then we're left dealing with, well, this is the truth of it though, right? This is what actually happened versus what you intended. So it's like a double whammy, because most of us don't intend to mess it up, so you have
And
to
you
deal
laugh. And then you can laugh about it. I mean, we got to the point where we were laughing about it and I felt better about it. But you know, I mean, when it happens over the weekend and you don't know what to do. But in the end, let's wrap this up and talk about this. In the end, we do have to use discernment, but there's some times where the truth just needs to be said and you cannot beat around the bush. And you have to know which one to use when, don't you?
Yes. Well, there's a very good Kenny Rogers song. You got to know when to
No,
hold them
hold
and know when to fold them, right? You got to know when you're going to say your hard truth. And sometimes hard truth is a matter of like life and death, or
yeah.
and sometimes it's a matter of preference, right? So you've got to be discerning and you have to think about the outcome. But sometimes the hard truths, people will hold them in for so long that at the expense of themselves, about being in denial because they don't want to hurt someone or don't want to say something that might offend someone. So you have to also think about, do I deserve to tell my truth? Yes. Am I worthy of my truth? Absolutely. And then am I in environments and am I creating relationships? That's why sometimes people can't tell their truth to someone they know. They have to tell to a stranger or the therapist, where the relationship is very clear. Like, I get to tell you my truth because you're a therapist and you can't do anything with it. Right? Or I'm going to tell a stranger because it's easier because they'll never see them again. But some truths you have to tell people in relationship with, because they're the ones that can hold that for you. So that's why truth is so fascinating. But I do encourage you people to think about, especially in my role as a therapist, sometimes people will say their truth and they'll be like, blurt it out. And then they'll be, oh, I've been holding that for so long, but yet the sky didn't crumble. No one came in and said, no, you're wrong. I didn't do anything, like judge them and said, I can't believe you said that. But they spend so much precious time and energy holding in their truth, that sometimes they encouraging people to express their truth in a thoughtful way with a person that can handle it and manage it and help them through it is really helpful. That's what we call our best friends. Like, help me, you'll tell me the truth. Tell me what to do, right? Like, we do that because the truth seeks a way to the surface. It always does. And that is important to remember about, again, our human condition. It just is what it is.
Well, I got a topic for our next show because you just nailed it. And we talked about it, but we didn't talk about it. Truth and humility. There's something that we really, all of us learn. Now, in my recovery program, my birthday month is July. And so there you have it. That happens to be the month of humility. So every year I have to go through the whole month talking about humility. I mean, really, honestly, that's it. And it is such a powerful, powerful thing. I think we should talk about that next time. We'll come up with something really cool, because humility is one of the most misunderstood and yet one of the most incredible energies that we have, right? And it
Yes.
is like forgiveness. We so misunderstand it.
Yes.
Last word, what's your personal message? And please give out your website. Thank you for us talking about the good, the bad, the ugly about hard truth.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pat. It's so fun to wrestle with the truth and have these conversations. And You can find me at knutsonspeaks.com. I'll tell you that. And then my message really is this, and I want to make sure I'm saying it right. So I'm going to pull up how I wrote it. Okay. But I think the truth is easier to manage in the context of relationships where we feel safe, we feel seen, and then we can manage the truth when we feel seen by, even if it's a stranger and they're having a relationship at that moment. I can manage it if I feel seen and if I feel safe. Like with the electrician, I felt seen and I felt safe enough to like hear the truth, right? And in the relationship with my partner or with friends, like I feel seen and safe enough to handle those things. But the truth at the end of the day is, in order for the truth to come out, whoever gets to hear that, it's because we need each other. We're in relationships, and those relationships matter deeply, deeply, deeply. And it, again, is not relationship in the context of someone you've known forever. It could be a stranger that you shared a special moment with. It could be your therapist where you finally said something. It could be someone in your personal life where you created enough trust where you could finally let the truth come out. And it is a beautiful thing when we realize how connected we are to each other and how much we need each other. And that's what I want to just put out there. Truth needs other people and relationships to survive. And I hope that if in the end, if there's a hard truth that you've been keeping inside or need to tell, that you find the right place and the right person to share that, so that it can express itself, and then you can move on to what's next.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I'm going through that right now, because there are some truths that we as a company, myself, Jessica and Linda, we really need to be clear. And one of the things that's hard is to express something that everybody understands. You know, we are getting ready to grow. And when we say to our team, we need everybody all in at any time we need you, boy, I'll tell you, there's nothing more powerful coming from us when we say it and we really mean it. But in the end, you can only take care of your own truth and not somebody else's. And when they don't match, you gotta know when to hold them.
Know when to fold,
Hold them.
know
All
when
right.
to walk away, know when to run. There you go.
Oh, we're gonna sing next time. Thank you all for tuning us in, turning us on. We'll see you next time.
You have been listening to Get Big Out Loud Radio, where we explore the complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life with me, Kari Knutson, joining Dr. Pat live every second Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com. I will help you to know which thoughts are keeping you small in order for you to get big. Get big and live your life out loud. For more information, visit KnutsonSpeaks.com.